Good evening, everyone. My name is Colleen Wright, and on behalf of all of us at the Rogers Memorial Library, we would like to thank you all for being here at an oral history evening about the Southampton Fire Department. And we'd like to thank the 138 men who help us every day, who are there every day, even though we don't always think about it. We'd like to thank all of them, those of them who are not in our panel, and those who aren't able to be here tonight, and those who have joined us this evening. Thanks for being here. I'd like to say thank you, special thank you to Mrs. Roy Wines, seated here, who's the widow of Roy Wines Jr., and who first had a conversation with me about the fire department and its interesting history, and got me interested in pursuing the idea at all. And this she did. She directed me to her son, Roy Wines, and I am very grateful to Roy for his help putting together this program. He's been wonderful and patient and connected everyone, and if it weren't for him, we really wouldn't be able to have this evening. Thank you very much, Roy. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about Roy. Roy is seated all the way on the right. It's for those few of you who may not know him. He is the fire commissioner for the village of Southampton and is a member of the fourth generation of the Wines family to serve in the Agawam Engine Company. His son, Buddy, is the fifth generation to serve, and his son is here. We're going to introduce the various generations in a little bit of time, but he also serves in the Agawam Engine Company. Roy is the owner of Roy Wines Plumbing and is married to Catherine Wines, here in our audience, is the father of Buddy and the stepfather of Everett and Elizabeth. He has served 28 years in the Southampton Fire Department, and he remains very active in community and civic affairs. Thank you very much, Roy, for being here. We'd like it if Roy could introduce the current chiefs of the Southampton Fire Department.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's nice to see a good group here so we can tell you about ourselves tonight. I'd like to just take 1 minute before I introduce the chiefs and just say one thing about the panel that's here. 28 years ago when I came into this department as a young fella, I was pretty nervous because I knew what I was making a commitment to. The one nice thing that is an honor for me tonight is to be the fire commissioner for these fellows here. 28 years later, they're still very active in this department. And it's an honor to be serving them as their commissioner. At this time, I'd like to have the chief come forward. This is our current chief, Chief McKay, and he'll take a minute to introduce our active chiefs.
I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Hope you enjoy the show. These guys will have some special memories to share with you. This time I'd like to introduce my first Assistant Chief, Doug Oliver, and my second Assistant Chief, who couldn't be with us tonight, is James Walsh. Again, I hope you enjoy the show and enjoy the evening.
Don't go too far away because we may have to use you for some questions.
We've
got lots of questions, and you may be able to give us some of the answers. But I'd like to introduce the rest of these gentlemen. To your right, to my left, is Stanley Guzowitz. Born and raised in Southampton, Stanley Guzowitz has been a member of the Agawam Engine Company for 51 years. Wow. I think it must be keeping you young to be on the fire department for a long time, because I couldn't believe how long these men had served. He was a past captain of the Southampton Fire Department, and along with Roy Wines Jr., he was the first of the Southampton firemen to use a Scott air pack, which you'll find out about later. Stanley Guzowitz is a retired plumber and is married to Irene Guzowitz and has 2 children, Pat and Bob. Thank you for being here, Stanley. Next to Stanley is Rod Pearson. You can't miss Rod Pearson because he's pretty tall. Rod is descended from an old Southampton family and has served with the Agawam Engine Company for 39 years. Now his son Chip is the 3rd generation to serve with that same company. He's also a former chief of the Fire Department for 7 years, beginning in the 1980s. Rod Pearson is the owner of Squires & Pearson and is married to Joanne Pearson, who is a wonderful library employee, and is the father of 3 daughters and 1 son. Please welcome Rod Pearson. Now we'll go to the back row, and sitting directly in back of me is Bill Culver, who, believe it or not, is the oldest man currently serving in the Southampton Fire Department. Bill has served with the Hook and Ladder Company for 42 years. Like the rest of the group, Bill grew up in Southampton and has been a self-employed building contractor. He is married to the former Evelyn Brennan and has 2 sons, one of whom, Bill Jr., also serves in the Hook and Ladder Company. Thanks very much, Bill, for being here. Seated next to Bill Culver is a 3rd-generation fireman, Edward Corrigan, better known to his friends as Ebby. They all have nicknames. Born and raised in Southampton, Ed has served with the Southampton Hook and Ladder Company for 50 years and is their head driver. He is joined by 2 of his sons, Edward and Maurice, who I believe are here with us tonight, in that company. Ed is a retired landscaper and excavator and is married to the former Pat Jablonski, and in addition to their 2 sons, they have a daughter who lives in Southampton. Welcome here this evening. Next to Mr. Corrigan is Don Fanning, another familiar face and lifelong Southampton resident who is serving his 49th year with the fire police as a captain. He is a retired policeman and is married to Barbara Fanning, who was very helpful to me this evening, and has 4 daughters, 2 of whom, Erin and Teresa, are living here in Southampton. Thank you very much. And last, but always not least, we are happy to have as our guest Herbert, better known as Eggy Rayner, an ex-chief of the fire department and the only member of our panel who served in the West Hampton Fire Department for 9 years before joining the Hook and Ladder Company of the Southampton Department, where he has been for 41 years. He is a retired union teamster, is married to Patricia Rayner, and has 2 daughters and a son, David, who's been a member of the Hook and Ladder Company for 16 years. Thank you all so much for being here. I'd like to begin, I think what we'll do is talk a little bit about the current day fire department, because some of us don't know about as much as we should know about the fire department, and then we're going to move back and talk a little bit about the history. So I'm going to ask some general questions, and if Chris or, yeah, I see Chris and Doug back there, if they want to help answer, or if any of you can tell me the answers, I hope you'll just pipe up. Would you all like to come up front for just a minute? Okay. Yeah, okay. We'll sign language to Roy. Okay. Can we just talk a little bit about the structure of the fire department, Roy, chiefs, companies, etc.?
Well, what's nice is we have 2 chiefs here tonight, ex-chiefs, and maybe we can just take a minute, start with the chiefs and their positions, and maybe they'd like to reflect on their time frame of what the function of the chief is and how many assistants you had, and maybe you can give us a little bit of, you want to start on it?
Are there always 3 chiefs?
There's always, in my time, there's always been 3 chiefs. And the department itself is composed of 5 companies: engine company, Hook and Ladder, 2 hose companies, and a fire police company. We also have not recently, but there became apparent a need for a rescue squad, which is composed of volunteers from all 5 companies. And that was formed back in
70s, was it?
somewhere in there. And that is becoming more and more involved in various type calls mostly, unfortunately, accidents
I see.
and things of that nature.
How many people are there in the rescue squad?
Help me out, so what do you, 35? Somewhere there.
About
30
25.
to 35 times. And basically, I think that's what we have in each of our 5 companies. Because we consist of roughly 145 to 150 firemen. And we all have our duties in our different companies. But this was a formation to try to keep up with the ongoing problems with traffic and the seriousness of dealing with the driver. As people are driving down the highway and they have their accidents, you have the concern of how to handle people because of the insurances today. So we have well-trained firemen. They work hard as a rescue group, and they handle every aspect of that company to extract the motorist and protect them until the EMTs can take over. And at that point, then we're very fortunate. We have a good ambulance service, both here in the village and in the town. And with that, we work hand in hand with the ambulance crews, and more and more people are in our department and in the ambulance departments have dedicated their lives to becoming EMTs and learning how to save the motorists, because our job as firemen is to protect lives. And the fire department has taken a great pride in the rescue department. And it's a combination of each.
This is a fire department, so you may hear calls, and we just hope there's not a fire in the next hour. About how many fires do you all respond to every year? How many alarms, I should say?
We have about 120 some odd major items that we're probably dealing with, but far greater than that, we respond to a tremendous amount of false alarms, and that's a major concern because we try to be there for everybody, and the numbers grow as the population grows. But it's something that probably you fellows might want to comment on.
Yeah,
I think the last count was up to 700 and some calls for this year. Now we got November and December. So.
Still to go.
Yes.
So you mean 700 calls and maybe only about 100 are real fires?
I would say that, yes. Maybe less than that fires.
Are the false alarms, what's the nature of the false alarm? Is it someone who thinks they have a problem but doesn't, or is it a hoax? Is it a prank call?
Well, a lot of times the alarms will be not taken care of properly.
I see, okay.
And like construction workers, they're in the building, the dust gets in the alarm.
I see.
It'll set it off, so.
Now, can you tell me what procedure happens when someone dials, is it 911, and reports a fire? Can you tell me exactly what happens, any of you? The steps, where does it ring, who tells whom?
On the current scene, I can probably these current questions I'll try to answer before we move into what they want to talk about. But we have a 911 system at Village Hall, and the village police man phones, and from there, when you call in on 911, we know exactly your location, so that if you're not able to communicate, the mere fact that you made that call tells us everything about your home, who it is, and we can then go into action to make our response. And I think that was a nice feature because it's working out very good for the department.
Roy, how are the individual firemen notified when there's a fire?
And we all have pages. We have different tones. We're all responsible for different phases. Like we have a brush tone for brush fires. We have a rescue tone. The chiefs pretty much man all the 23s with the alarms. And a lot of times it's driving them crazy. They're spending an awful lot of time chasing false alarms to find out that it's a malfunction.
I see. And would everyone be on call for every fire then? No.
No.
In other words, a certain kind of fire would be handled by a certain company?
Right. I think we all have different jobs to do, and at different times, like currently, Don is a captain, so he'll rotate. Isn't that
Yes.
your responsibility?
I get it every 5th month, and we're on it for a month here, and sometimes it's hectic.
Right.
Because, not so much for me because I'm retired, but other people like the chiefs there, they got their own jobs, and it's a full-time job now, so.
How many times does it happen in the middle of the night? Do more calls come in during the middle of the night, or do they come in the daylight hours?
Any time throughout the 24 hours. Ask my wife about that. She'll say, turn that darn thing off, please. I'm on call, so they have to go. Yes.
This has all evolved from, and I'm sure all of us remember, there used to be an air horn on the top of the post office down here. Probably some of you people are familiar with it. And they used to have a series of signals, 6-4 or 2-3 or whatever, which corresponded to different locations. So when that horn went off, that was during the day. Everybody shagged to the firehouse to see where it was, and supposedly the first person to the firehouse was supposed to answer the phone and then write it on the blackboard where the fire was. Well, we've had some various things written on that board. One of the famous ones is a fellow by the name of Danny Harrington answered the alarm and got a little excited, and he wrote, "Over the bridge." And we had to try to figure out where over the bridge was. Which was a barn down in Watermill. He meant the railroad bridge. Going over the railroad.
I remember a lot of us who grew up here were sad when they stopped doing that because we used to be able to go to the fire. A lot of people did that, go to the fire.
I don't know if we're still on the same subject, if Rod wants to expand on Danny getting here to the firehouse.
Well, there's a lot of stories about Danny, but one of the famous ones is not the horn, but the siren. The siren used to ring at night, which it doesn't anymore, for a house fire. And it was a house fire, and it was also a very snowy night and cold. And Danny didn't take any time to put any shoes on. His car was snowed in, and he ran out into the street and started running for the firehouse. Daily News truck finally stopped and picked him up for a little past Arts Market, and he came here all the way barefoot.
I just want to ask you a couple more questions. I want to ask you how you select your members. The ones who aren't third and fourth generation.
Well, they can apply to any one of the 5 companies, and we actively go out and look for candidates. We are unusual in the fact that in New York State, we're one of the few departments that have 5 charters or 5 companies. And whoever wants to apply applies to one of those companies. And at that point, they're voted on or investigated and voted on to join. At that point, they go on what they call probationary status, and they have to go through any number of schools and training and hazmat training and basic fire school, and when all that is done, then they step into the ranks.
Are there any women in the fire department?
Yes, we have several. In fact, let's see, Donna Bennett is involved, and her father is Don Bennett. We have Terry Westerhoff. She's with the ladder. Donna's with the fire police. And what are we looking?
Jim.
Was she the first? I think wasn't she the first woman?
She was the first, yeah.
So you actively accept members when they apply. I wonder if anybody's getting any ideas. No, don't worry, I'm not going to lie.
If
Where
you
are...
need what company?
That would be hard. Okay, just briefly, without getting too technical, what's the boundary of the fire district that you all are in charge of?
Conic Road up in Hampton Bays, Shinnecock Hills, and then we go to Blank Lane and Watermill, so it's quite an area. And
So-
then we go up to Edgewoods Road
Edgewoods
and
Road.
Hampton Park. So basically on the highway, I think that, flex to Watermill Lumber, area, Rose Hill.
Okay.
Rose Hill Road.
Right, just a little past.
Okay. Just a couple of words about fire trucks. How much does a fire truck cost, and how many fire trucks do you own? Is the village the owner of the fire trucks?
Yes.
And how many fire trucks do you own of the new ones that you use?
Well, one of the things that we have that's unique from the village structure with the fire department, that is we have a replacement program. So that with our piece of equipment, our village board deals with the fire department, and we try to do I guess pretty much, we have to have a replacement program on a 20-year overall life of the truck. And that averages out to about maybe one every year, year and a half.
I see.
And that's complete coverage of pumpers, hook and ladder, tankers, chief's vehicles, fire police, rescue, and I think that covers it.
That's quite a few fire trucks. Now, are they divided between this firehouse and the
Three
Windmill Lane
locations.
and the Shinnecock Hills?
Penny,
Yes.
those three firehouses, we have a unique situation in that we have tankers, two tankers. We have one on the western end of our district and one in the eastern end, right here in this district. And we have a Class A pumper here and a Class A pumper there. And then at headquarters on Windmill Lane, we have a pumper, a fire police truck, and a rescue van, and a mini pumper. And we have a big involvement on the east end of the district with the tanker and the Class A pumper. We can be activating, fighting the fire, and then consequently the western district comes over and it acts like a backup, and it's a very, very unique situation. Very good.
While we're talking about that, do you all cooperate with other fire departments like Mercy Fire Department? Is there sort of a friendly rivalry? Is there?
Anytime we need them, they're
They're
there.
there, and the same
Likewise,
goes for them.
yes.
What about Hampton Bays, or does
Yes.
Bridgehampton have a fire department? Bridgehampton. Have there been many instances in which you've had to have 3 or 4 towns be involved in a fire? Maybe we'll be talking about the fires in a few minutes. Okay. Where do you get the water to put out the fires?
Suffolk County Water Authority, we have hydrants throughout the district, and pretty good source of water, so,
So fire hydrants?
yes.
We are capable of pulling water from the bay, pulling water from your swimming pool in your backyard if we have to.
To put out your house fire?
Yes.
I see.
We are able to deploy it.
How many gallons of water was it the pumpers? How many gallons did they hold?
Well, the average pumper holds 750 gallons, and they have a pump on there of 1,200 gallons a minute, which is it's a lot of water if you stop and think about it. And fortunately, we do have a good source of supply of water in the district.
That's great.
One thing I'd just like to say about the uniqueness of our department with the other departments, not only are we grateful to having their cooperation for the mutual aid, but once a year, the young fellows are able to get together out here and compete, and we bring the other departments in, and they have a little bit of a contest with our neighboring communities, and it's nice camaraderie. So
That's right. How do they compete? I mean, is there some kind of a fire type of thing?
we put up a little test form with the pumpers, and they have to run, suit up,
I see.
hit the targets, and some years Southampton wins, and other years we, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we do pretty well. But the young fellows,
That's
the
great.
young guys,
That's great.
be happy to see that.
What is the most common cause of fires?
Men, women, and children.
That's true. That is very, they've taught us that in basic training. That's what it was.
Just careless behavior?
Yes. Negligence, children playing with matches, people putting paper goods, fabrics, things close to a dryer, their furnace, or poor electrical wiring, and a lot of extension cords running through rugs and mattresses and everything else. Those kind of things.
I almost left the fire department last week because I forgot to turn off the burner on my stove. But I
Leaving the pots on the stove.
That's what I did. That's what I did. Let's see, I've forgotten who, it might have been Ed Rayner. We were talking about the fact that when the fire department celebrated, I think its 100th anniversary, is that correct?
Yes.
That you all planted a time capsule. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
We had a 100th anniversary. I was very honored to be the chief. Rod and Charlie Holmes were my deputies, and we worked 3 years to plan this 100th anniversary. And we had raffles, and we made quite a bit of money to help defray the expenses for the particular 100th anniversary day. And in doing that, we had all the firemen were invited to the Polish Hall for dinner, and we had so many people that we had to put a special tent up outside to take care of all our guests and firemen. And then we had a parade that was antique equipment and stuff like that. And that kind of got us started with the antique equipment. As you see around here, we had a little mini tournament, and Charlie Holmes and I were in charge of it. And Dr. Schreier, he was a big help in that. And then that was the Saturday, and then the Sunday we had the capsule that I was speaking of. We had two telephone people, Peter Gale and Richie Jaminski. They waterproofed it. As you know, the telephone, you see the telephone boxes outside, they're all airproof and waterproof, so they don't short the wires out and everything. So these fellas did a super job on this particular capsule. And we buried it, and we're supposed to be opened up in 100 years, and 18 years have gone by so far.
Now, where is it?
It's buried right at the flagpole, at the base of the flagpole on Monument Square, Soldier Square, on Monument Square. And the people that were in, Mr. Roy's father was in charge of that particular phase of the capsule. And we tried to figure out what we put in the capsule, but we do know it was a journal of our fire department and everything like that. But we couldn't figure out what else we put in it. We filled it up. Yeah.
Did you mark the calendar for 2081 so they know to look?
And the next day, Sunday, we had a combined church service at the firehouse, and then we had some dignitaries speak, and then we all went upstairs and had a little get-together with everybody, and it was a very, very rewarding weekend. We made a lot of friends and met a lot of new people that were amazed at what a beautiful town Southampton is. And being volunteers, we put a lot of our own time in. As I say, it took us 3 years to raise the money, and it didn't cost the village or the district anything. We paid for it, the firemen paid for it, which is rewarding in a sense because everybody pitched in and we did a super job.
That sounds great. You have a question?
Yes, I wondered if there was a cutoff point of age. If an applicant wanted to come in, you don't take somebody who's already retired.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a number that...
I think 45 is the cutoff date, yes.
I know one other question I wanted to ask, and that is, how long does it take you all to respond to fires?
I'd like to answer that.
Answer.
No, I'm going to tell you the truth. Now, Mr. O'Connell was in
Shippey's having dinner one night, and this is years ago, I think, even when we had this truck here were in operation. And he told the guy next to him, he says, I'll tell you what, he says, that firehouse will be empty in 3 minutes. He says, you can't tell him that. He said, I'll put some money on it. Sure enough, that firehouse was empty and gone. And this is well, you try to catch one of these fire trucks in the night, and my nephew's right down the road there, and I try to beat him. He was sleeping with his clothes on.
I know one of the questions I had on my original list was, what kind of uniform do you wear to the fires? And they said, uniform? We just put on whatever we can muster. Do you keep your clothes near the bed?
Right next to my bed.
Next to the bed.
This group, I think we've gotten a little, we're not as quick anymore.
Last week, we had an alarm, and one of the young fellas that answered, who was on first due on the truck, he responded to the firehouse a pair of long johns.
I imagine you all have stories. More stories where that one came from.
What's very interesting here is this panel, a lot of us have sons involved, so there's got to be competitions in the families.
Yes. Now that we're talking about sons, could we just take a moment to ask the sons of you all to come up here and just get recognized for a minute? Roy, could you introduce the various sons who might be here?
One of the things, we had made a list, an overall list of how many father-son combinations there are, and I'll just take a minute and quickly read the names, and then we'll find in the room here the father and son arrangement. Mike Camp and his father Fred Camp are active. Mike's in the Agawam Engine Company, Fred's in the hose company. Rod and his son Chip. Mark Press and his son Aaron. My son Buddy. Bob Essay and his son Rob. Harry Price has 2 boys, Dave and Bob. John Aquino and his son Dave. Don Bennett and his daughter Donna. Eddie Cargan and his 2 sons, Maurice and Ed. Bill Culver and his son Bill Jr. Steve Phillips and his son Mark. Eggy and his son Dave. And Booth Rangenbach and his son Jim. And that's our active list of father-sons. And
I think we should give them a big hand. Whoever is here to come forward so we can introduce them.
Maybe you'd like to introduce your boy, your sons?
That's my oldest one, Reese. Next to him is Edward. Reese has been in for 15 years and Edward for 8.
Great.
Was your dad a fireman too?
Yes.
Yeah, his name was Maurice. Oh,
Eddie, your
My son David, he's ex-captain of the Southampton Hook and Ladder, 16 years.
Bob Price is here, and his brother Dave, and then I mentioned, and then Harry, his father. Go back one more generation, don't we, Bob?
Yeah, my grandfather was a chief.
Okay, and then let's see, my son Bud. He's his best generation of Agawam Engine Company.
Somebody asked about Edward's father, if he was in the company. Well, he was in the hook and ladder, and he was the head driver of that truck right there. And many a time we went to the fire. When I first came in here back in 1951, you'd see him out there cranking that thing. One guy would get behind the wheel, and the other guy would get in the front and crank it, and they'd all jump on.
So this is a fire truck?
Yes.
But you actually used the fire truck? But did you never use it?
Yes, we did. That's what I'm talking about.
Really?
I first came in the fire department.
All the trucks that run were active trucks.
In this, for the Southampton Fire Department?
Yes.
Ah.
One thing that I probably should make mention is that, Commissioner, and we have a very good antique department, and they work very hard to restore the trucks and bring them back to their original state. And a lot of thanks goes to the committee as well as to the Downs family, which is something that I'd just like to reflect upon.
Right. We wanted to acknowledge the Downs family
Yes.
for making that great space available to you all.
I think a couple of thoughts here tonight are on the committee on the antiques. Rod,
Really, driver up there.
Kenny was here. Kenny would like to say, we're very fortunate he's here tonight. Kenny usually drives the truck. I think that truck has been in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
Did you drive it down?
No.
That's where the truck
We travel it.
Is that Cyrene?
Oh, yeah. It's got a point where it's...
Yes.
Is it three different departments and they separate entities?
The companies, you mean?
Yeah, the companies.
Yeah,
They are
that's,
separate entities, but when the fire whistle rings, there's one company and one boss, and that's the chief.
can we talk just a few minutes, just briefly, about the history, when the fire department started, the first company, et cetera? I think you all, I think that Evie and Charlie and Rod might have a couple of words to say about that.
Well, if I can refer to my crib notes here. First fire company formed in Southampton was the Agawam Fire Company. The original members were a group of men who started meeting together in 1881 to establish a fire department. During these first years, the meetings were conducted by Chairman J.H. Pearson. I would love to know if that's any relation. And about 6 years later, offshoot of that was the Hook and Ladder. And Hook and Ladder Company was formed, and then through the years, I don't have the exact dates, the host companies. And in Bill Bennett's time, Bill Bennett was an ex-chief, and I believe it was in the 40s, he realized the need for a fire police company, and at that point they formed the fire police company.
That's 1949. Our anniversary's coming up this year. We're 50 years old. Yep.
Have you been in the same company since that?
49 years, yes.
Same company?
Yes.
So when you have your anniversary, they'll have their anniversary.
I hope to.
Yeah.
Good Lord willing.
Let's take a minute to mention some of the former firemen who are no longer living. I think you all mentioned Wesley Sutliff,
Yeah.
Chip Schreier. Can someone just say a couple of words about them?
Well, Wes was the second in command of that truck, and he had a fire on one snowy night, and he took it around the corner up by Ewing Motors and split it sideways. And another fire they had south of Hill Street, and he was up on the ladder of the second story, and engine company, a hose company, they stuck the hose through the window and knocked the ladder out from underneath him. He had to grab onto the windowsill for dear life. He was quite
Was he in the fire department for many, many years?
31 years, yes.
And he was fairly old when he died, didn't he?
Yes. Did you make 100?
Yeah, I think there was an article in the newspaper about it. Yes, Ed?
When Mr. Sutcliffe turned 99, believe it or not, he took a driver's test and got his license. And he was bragging to us that he didn't have to go have it renewed till 103. And he lived to be that age. He drove every day, I mean every week on a Thursday to Riverhead. He looked forward to it, and he did very well. A lot of people were worried about him, and they followed him, and he drove very well. So they couldn't stop him from doing it. But he was very active in that.
Well, if he was only in the fire department for 35 years, he must have broken the rule about having to be 45. Because if he was 100 and something, he died.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
See what I mean?
Arithmetic.
He would have probably joined when he was about
Yeah, well,
7.
Yeah, right.
Maybe that's when they made the new rule. Yes.
What I've heard from these gentlemen over the years, I just want to mention, back when you got in the fire department, back in those early 20 days and 1980s, you just showed up to a fire. That's how you got in. Just grab a hose and off you go. And I think Wes was a Main Street fire, and I think he was, 15 maybe or whatever, so that's how you got the fire back then.
In fact, I was reading a little bit in that history. I mean, they had the bucket brigade, right? And don't you all still have a piece of equipment that was hand carried?
Yes, well, we have one, but it's not ours. It's a chemical tank. It's on wheels, and it's activated with acid and water. You tip it up, and it sprays the water out. We acquired that from, I think, over in Ram Island. They had it over there, and they didn't want it anymore, so we took it, and Doug Dollar, our present chief there, assistant chief, he and Mark Press took it all apart and fixed it up and did a super job on restoring it. And we sent to Elmira where it was made, and they gave us all the nomenclature and everything on how the thing was, where it went, and what was done with it. And it was at that time, it was a great piece of equipment.
Let's mention, could we mention Chick Schreier also?
Yeah, I can tell you.
Yeah.
When I first made lieutenant, I forget what year it was, but one Sunday morning, the very next Sunday morning after the elections, back door bell rang, and there was Chick Schreier, and he had a book, without exaggeration, was that thick, loosely binder, with New York state laws and water laws and specs for fire trucks, and with that he hands it to me and said, study this. And Chick was a member of the hose company, and very set in his ways. He was an admiral, or he was an admiral in the reserves. But Chick also took the fire department from, I won't say horse and wagon, but from trucks like this, 1941, to its present status with modern trucks, modern waterways. He did a lot of work. He did a lot of work with training. He was friendly through his military connections with a number of NFPA instructors who he brought into Southampton to put on seminars and classes and things for us. And he really did a lot to bring the fire department up. And one story, Chick's story, was when they bought the hook and ladder, it had a bucket, hydraulic bucket that goes up in the air. Well, the specs went out on the trucks, and as you people well can visualize, the back and forth between the salesman and the truck committee and the village. It's a lot of paperwork, a lot of goings on. Anyway, truck finally arrived in Southampton and pulled up to the ramp, and everybody was walking around, oh, what a nice truck it is. And it was. It's a nice truck, still is a good truck. Chick said, got in the bucket, he says, take me up high as you can go. Now this truck was spec'd for 75-foot bearing. So So they put the old truck straight up in the air, and with that, Chick pulls out a tape measure. Drops the tape to the ground, and the damn bucket was about 6 inches short of 75 feet. And he was able to get some money back from the company. They had to backwater on their price because the thing did not meet specs. It didn't go 75 feet.
That's great.
Very thorough.
It takes all kinds of people to make a good fire. What is the largest structural fire that you all can remember, or even that you can't remember? That that happened before you?
Jim Lane on the ocean.
Horn fire.
Colonel Horn?
That was,
Can you tell us? Were you around for that?
yeah, I was around for that. It's a huge house with a clay tile roof on it. And we had just gotten these pumpers, these white pumpers. These were big, like 750 gallons a minute, I guess. The water mains there were like 4-inch water mains. And the fire, the house was pretty well involved. The whole second, third floor painters were stripping paint with torches. When they left, the house caught fire. I think Harold Dufresne was the chief at that time, and he estimated the weight of that roof so many tons, so he wouldn't allow a fireman to enter the building. And we pumped water with the 2 Macs did, and one truck would take water from each other because they were so powerful, the mains were so inadequate. And Bridgehampton came, and they threw a pumper into Old Town Pond and delivered an awful lot of water. But getting back to the weight of the roof and keeping the firemen out, when that building burned, that roof went right down to the basement. And thank goodness they wouldn't allow anyone to go in. And I remember that.
About what year was that? Would have been?
That had to be around 49 or 50, I think it was 1950, right? But as a child, I can remember the Mohawk fire, going down to watch that. They called
Was that on Main Street?
On Main Street, where the corner of, where Golden Pear, right from that corner back. Big 3-4 stores, the mall. They called it the 2-year fire. It started December 31st and was still burning in January 1st. And, it was huge. Mohawk, of course, all you needed was salt and pepper because all the turkeys and hams and everything else were all cooked. It was huge. Very huge.
And then did they rebuild Bohats over where the IGA is?
No.
Didn't they?
No, they rebuilt and then went to IGA.
I see.
And then they had another fire in about 20 years after that, when I was in high school.
Oh, really?
One more time.
In Bohats? I'd like to talk about a few fires, but let me just ask you, do you all remember the first fire that you were in?
Yes, I do.
Can anybody mention it?
I do. On October of 1951, I was 20 years old. First guy at the firehouse on Window Lane. We had Model 8 Ford. And I guess I got out on the road first, or I guess I let the fireman out of the Window Lane firehouse, and I got behind him to a certain point, maybe up on Hill Street at the church. And I pulled the ears down. I had the spark and the gas pedal, and let a soul pass me. So I got the Atterbury turn. When I got the turn, but the next meeting I went to, they said, who was driving that Model 8 Ford? Me. Like me? I'm a young guy, right? I did. Don't you ever do that again. And these cars and fire trucks. I really caught the devil for that.
Does anybody else remember the first fire?
I'd like to remember when I realized what the responsibility of the chief was. The village highway department over here was on fire. It had trucks and payloaders, and it was burning pretty badly. And we started to put the hose into the building, and one of the highway guys came and said, there's some chemicals in there, and if you put water on, it'll explode. So we changed our tactics right then and there, and so we sent some people in with Scott packs. And this is when I realized my responsibility. I sent, I think Dougie Dalton might have been one of them, but he went in there, they went in there, and they didn't go in the building a foot, and they disappeared. Now, we have a procedure with Scott Pack people. We always go with a buddy system, 2 people, and we have a person outside that checks the time and checks who the people are that go in. Well, this particular time, I was checking everything because I was concerned about their welfare, and they disappeared. And so I was so glad to see them when they came back, because I was the guy that sent them in there, and when they came out, boy, I was very relieved, and that's when I realized what the seriousness of being the chief is. You got a lot of responsibility. But it worked out fine, and the fellows found they were told where to look for the chemicals and fertilizer, and they found it, and we detoured the water, and we put the trucks out, and we got the payload around and everything like that. So it was quite an interesting experience.
You guys go down, they had that fire, you did something down at Sag Harbor, at the hardware store.
Yes,
That was a big fire, that was close to there.
the hardware store.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Well, I went down there and pumped for 8 hours.
Oh, my
Yeah, Easter Sunday.
That was Easter, and we had just had our first 2 trucks arrive. That was 12 and 14, 2 pumpers. And they pumped all day long. We were really concerned because they were new trucks.
Where was that fire?
Sag
Main
Harbor.
Street, Sag Harbor.
The Emporium?
No.
How hard was it in the fall that was West Hampton?
How about the Pine Barrens, you mean?
Yeah.
Were you all involved in the Pine Barrens fire?
Oh, everybody was.
That was quite a unique thing in the sense that we have these brush trucks, and they were calling for them, and we put our brush truck on a trailer and took it over there and expedited the situation. And when the fire came, the head of the fire came, and the fire departments, there must have been 40 or 50 fire trucks pointing their nozzles, squirting water at this head coming down on them. And it was in the meridian of the sunrise, and that fire, it just went right over the top of us, okay? So the guys got in the trucks, and they went around, they went down towards the village of West End Beach by the railroad tracks to try to stop it there. But in the meantime, the fire was burning to the east toward the Suffolk Air Base, and I happened to be in that corner as a coordinator, and Southampton had a brush truck. And only one brush truck, and you had 2 gigantic payloaders, and they were taking it and knocking the fire down, and we were cutting the fire off on the east end of it so it wouldn't burn around us. And I sent the brush truck in, and again with the brush trucks we always go with 2 together, and we only had this one. I think Roy, you was driving.
First night, I was driving,
Someone was on
and
it.
my buddy was with me as a passenger, and the first night we had 2 crews, 2 trucks.
But it was a particular situation, but the job got done, and I'm still here. They didn't fire me. So. But it was amazing that the cooperation from volunteer firemen, spending 2 or 3 days steady out there, just putting the fire out. They put it out as fast as they put it out to start over again. And
Actually, that night when we were all over there, Bud was, I think, his first time in the woods, and I realized my age, and I said, boy, this is a lot of wood fire here. I turned the wheel over to him and said, look, we may as well, we're going to drive in the woods tonight. Plenty of it. And I think he spent the next week over there. All the young fellows hung in there, but the older fellows, we're glad to have the young available.
but it was
Waiting for the first fire.
Right, the first group, I think a lot of the younger fellows went up to, I think it was Rocky Point, over in Ridge, and then they came back tired, so we were ready to help them out. But nice to have a big department, because we have a lot to be proud of that night, and that whole week.
I'll tell you, in that same fire, I mean, I don't want to say ending, but it was kind of tough for me because I was third assistant chief. I was a captain, and Don explained, you rotate. So all our chiefs, they jumped and went over there and left me and the second assistant chief, Dave Price here. Well, we were rotating crews, and then, you know, in the beginning of the fire, these young fellas want to get over there. Well, I had to make a decision who goes and who doesn't. You know, you have to stay back and wait your turn. And that was hard, because a lot of guys want to go, but you had to put the best men forward and keep the younger guys back. And so we sat around this firehouse. I was here for almost 48 hours, just, you know, sleeping here and going home for a nap and coming back and rotating crews. That was a lot of work in itself right there, just organizing different crews.
Yes, Ron?
A little closer to home, there again, talking about a woods fire, brush fire, the day that Scotch Mist Inn burned. I don't know if anybody remembers that old, big old building that used to... Anyway, the fire started along the railroad, more or less west and north of Scotch Mist, and burned up the hill towards the inn. At that point, we were spread out on mutual aid. I had a truck over in Hampton Bays putting fire out in the dump of all places. And Sid, I think, was on the truck. Any number of us was over there. The call came on the radio, get back to Southampton. So we turned around, watered up, and came back. And as we came over Atterbury Hill, the smoke was just rolling. And we looked to the left, and Scotch Mist was still standing. Nothing was wrong with it. We went about another 50 feet, 100 feet, I don't know, not very far. We looked again, the whole roof instantly was a ball of flame. At that point, the call came that one of our crash trucks had stalled on the highway. And it stalled because there was so much smoke that the truck just wasn't getting enough oxygen to run. So we had to go pull this truck off the highway and creep down until we finally found the truck, put a chain on it. With that, the fire rolled right over our heads. And it was like being in like a big funnel. I don't remember it being that hot. It must have been hot, but I remember the noise. It was almost like a train coming. And with that, we pulled and went out the other side, and the fire kept going. And they finally stopped it down by, what's the name of that general? Down by the college.
Was it college there then at that time?
Oh yeah, the college was there.
I lived right across the street,
What was the cause of that fire, do you remember?
The train.
Everybody said it was a train, but who knows?
I know Peggy was with me on the looking ladder. They sent us up to the Scotch Mist Inn to wet the roof down. We were just getting organized. They had laid one line up to us. We was just getting organized, right? They come up and told us, get the hell out of there as fast as you could. So we had to feel the way back down to...
There's been a number of bad fires up through there.
Yeah, didn't they say that was always when they had the old steam engine?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
to shake the cold
Yeah,
and shake
yeah.
cocktails every day.
Another fire we had up there was Tucker Mill Inn. Anybody remembers that? Up in the back of Tucker Mill Inn. And I didn't make the truck, but I went up there and parked my car and jumped out and jumped on the truck, and we were fighting the fire, and all of a sudden the radio says, "Rod, come back to your car immediately." What the hell's wrong? He said, "You're about to lose your car." So we turned the fire truck around, came back, and I had a dog, and the dog went with me all home. And I left the dog in the car, and the fireplace came to move the car. The dog wouldn't let them fireplace move the car. So I had to come all the way back, move the car. Get it out of the way of the fire.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. What about Seven Ponds Inn? Were any of you involved in that fire?
Very much.
You were the head driver? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We went down there and we couldn't get very close to the fire. That big truck, because the hedge was about 30 foot high. So the chief comes to me, he says, I want you to back that truck through the perfect hedge. I said, no, I'm not going to back the truck through the hedge. So we just walked down the road maybe 20 feet or so, and there's a beautiful roadway that we got into the scene of the fire. Rich Hampton was there, Saigon was there.
That was a big,
Yes.
that was a big, and that was a beautiful old place. That's a shame that burned down.
That was my first major fire, and I was impressed with these fellows because a couple of them ended up showing up in tuxedos.
Yeah, it was a 90 battalion.
Oh, was that 9 battalion?
I was scared to death, and I thought, they're good.
Mostly in tuxedos.
What about the Irving? Did the Irving?
No,
They ripped that down.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I'd like to thank the fire department for all the work that they did in the fires over the years. It was wonderful. You know, they're
Wonderful.
helping us. And they're volunteer firemen.
Absolutely.
Which is wonderful.
We, anytime we're there at night. I'm sorry, we have a question?
Well, I do. I'm not a fireman, but I had an experience. Any of you in the fire department back in 1950? Okay.
All of them.
All of them.
The date was June 24th. It was my wedding day. And we had a fire an hour before my wedding in the Army. We had a garden wedding, and the firemen were there an hour before my wedding.
Oh,
I remember very well. Yeah. One of the workmen set fire to a small shed.
Yes, that was Ed Diamond's barn, right? That was Ed Diamond's barn?
Yes.
I was there. I was at the wedding.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, there were a lot of good firemen over the years because my dad had more than one fire. Unfortunately, he had a field fire with the wheat field and burned towards Watermore, and then we also had a huge barn that burned. But this is a small shed. It was just a little fire, but we had a big reception.
The new members on probation, right?
Yes, they are.
Do they have to attend so many fires?
Well, they have to go through all the classes, the schooling, basic training. And after they pass the probation period there's a committee that recommends them to be a member, or they reject them, or they hold them back for advanced training. But they have to be qualified before they become a fireman.
How long is probationary period?
Usually 6 months in our
6 months.
company.
Did any of you ever get lost when you were driving around in the middle of a fire?
I have.
Did you?
There again, get back to woods fires. We had, North Sea had a fire in the back of the dump at night. And we were up in there, and
1961.
it was up kind of the back of your house. And if anybody ever told me that I would get lost in my own backyard, I'd have told me they were crazy. But it was dead of night, and we did not know which way was up or how to get out of there. And we finally stumbled around and saw a red light on top of a radio antenna, and was able, that big radio tower down there, and was able to call out on the radio and say, hey, we see a red light there, well, go such and such, and we finally did get out.
Got you there.
That was a terrible fire. We had no fire hydrants at that time. We were up on Edgewood's Road. And we had just built our house, just moved in practically, and it was all smoke damage. That's when I appreciated the fire down that night. Yeah.
How about just humorous moments? I mean, you were doing something very serious, but do you have things happen that are funny?
I wouldn't want to hear that.
I did hear one, but we can't repeat it.
A humorous moment that Guzzy was part of. They used to have a little small truck, Dodge Power Wagon, and it had military tires on it. And the military tires, if anybody's familiar with them, has got just a little bit of tread that goes on the road, and the rest are lugs that pull you through mud and everything. Well, winter night, and we were going to a fire, got down here, and lo and behold, 4 of us wound up in the cab of this truck because it was so cold. Well, it was myself, I'm no lightweight, Guzzy, he's Peter Pan either, Dick Fowler, and Lenny Schumann. He was sitting on Dick's lap. And down the road we go, and came around Ernie Wilson's corner, and the back end went out because it was so icy and snowing. Truck went around once and just about stopped, and the water in the tank sloshed. And around we went again. Sloshed again, around we went again. And wound up down where they load the buses by the school in front of the town hall. And I won't tell you the comments, but Lenny Schumann was like a shot right out of a circus cannon. He walked back to the firehouse. And Dick Fowler, he very staid. Dick never said too much.
He said street light.
Yeah, makes sense. With that, we straightened out. Got everybody on board. Went far.
I was in the dental chair of Dr. Schreier, who was my dentist, when a fire came, and he just left me in the dental chair. The thing in my mouth.
You have designated drivers, and anybody can't just hop in the truck and drive, can they?
No, you have to check out. Head driver more is responsible to keep track of the truck and make sure it's got gas and all that sort of thing.
I see we have a question over there.
When of your communities in Suffolk County have paid fire departments? Or combinations of paid and volunteers?
Riverhead has a paid man in the house, more or less, for janitorial duties, and he fills in answering alarms and dispatcher and things like that, but that's the only one I know of in Suffolk County.
About how many hours a year do you volunteer firemen give to this community?
You'd have to ask the chief captain.
A lot.
A lot, yes. We have our regular monthly meetings, we have drills, it's an incredible amount of time that the fellows put in. They can tell you, it seems like we're forever trying to keep up with them, and it's tough on the younger fellows because they have to be really up and ready to handle the situations.
When I was doing interviewing to try to get a little bit of information about everyone, every time I met somebody, I would say, do you have any organizations or hobbies? And they said, the fire department. And I know that you all in the antique fire department, or who have been responsible for that, have put in lots and lots of extra hours. Is that not so? Getting your trucks ready for competitions, is that so? Can you tell us where you've been in the competitions, just quickly? Texas? Florida?
Syracuse.
Do you do pretty well in these competitions?
Yes. I got a minute to compliment Mr. Alan Cameron, James Allen Cameron. He was a great guy for this. He tried to organize that stuff, and he took you out to Texas, did he?
Did he really?
Yeah, and he took you to Florida, and I don't know where else he was going to go. Yeah. But
a lot for
Great
the
man.
community.
He was in the fire police.
You know, I guess that we might have time for a couple of questions. We could really go on and on, but I would like to say, on behalf of everyone in this community, thank you all, not just for being here tonight, but for the work you do for all of us. Thank you. I'd like to just touch on one more subject really quickly that I forgot to ask, and that is about the Medal of Valor. Stanley Guzwitz, can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes, I'm glad that you asked, because I was prepared to say a few words.
Yes, please do. I'm so sorry. I forgot to ask.
When it first started tonight, Roy said the prime reason of the fire department was to save lives and property, secondary. And going back over the years, just get the dates. In March 1976, March 23rd, Kenny Bennett was the first to respond to a fire at the corner of Railroad Plaza and Layton Avenue. And when he got there, mother of a child was screaming, "My baby's in the house, my baby's in the house." Kenny went in on his hands and knees, searched, came out empty. And then she gave him better instructions. He didn't have a chance to get a breath of air or to clear his lungs or anything. He went back in again on his hands and knees, and he found the baby in a crib. So he brought the baby out. He was completely exhausted. And he handed the baby to the first person he saw, which happened to be Aggie Rainey. And Aggie got this baby that was not responsive at all. They immediately applied CPR, and the baby started to cry moments later. You never heard so much cheering, clapping, and high-fiving, and everything else. Kenny was up on that truck. And Aggie also received a citation from the American Lung Association for the incident.
For that same incident.
Right. That little girl now is the mother of 2 children living on a ranch in Wyoming. Pretty little girl, she right.
I'm very grateful every day.
Oh, I'm sure of that. Well, I don't think she was old enough to realize what happened. And the second person I had to talk about, or people I had to talk about, was there was a report of a missing boy, and that was in June of 1985 in a sump in back of Terry and Dufresne's shop. I believe that the fire department got a very late call on it. And actually it was search and recover rather than search and rescue. However, 3 firemen were not going to give up. It was going to be search and recover. They wanted to rescue. And they were Mike Croak, Henry Hildreth, and Harold Studi. They dove into this muddy water, deep, visibility 0, and search. At the center of the pond where the playmate said he disappeared. It was the end of June. Of course, you had daylight hours go late until about 9 o'clock at night. And they spent 4.5 to 5 hours with outside sources coming in to aid. And they finally found the child in 14 foot of water at the water's edge, quite a ways from where this little boy said that he had disappeared. These guys are brave and courageous to do what they did. The waters were polluted, and a lot of runoff water and whatnot. And they certainly deserve what they got. Mark Press was on council back then, and he instituted the Medal of Valor. And the first people to get it was Kenny and Aggie for their thing. And then the next ones were these 3 guys, Hank and Mike and Harold Studi. Then the next person I want to talk about is a guy named Graham Leeds. lighting company truck was riding by Maycox Bay, and they saw a boat overturned with 2 men clinging on for life. And they called it in, and Graham had access to water skis, power skis. He went out, and when he got there was only 1 man there, the one that was going under. So he grabbed this guy and put him on the power skis and started to search for the other person. And as he did that, the guy, a high wave come and took the guy off the power skis, and the power skis drifted away on him. But he managed to grab this guy, swim ashore, drag him ashore, and save that guy's life. And so he was a Medal of Valor recipient. In March 31st, 1974, police were called to a residence on Meadow Lane, saying that there was a robbery in progress. The woman called in and said that I can hear all the noises, and they're trying to break in and whatnot. So the police responded. Peter Lander was a police officer. He got to the house, and the whole first floor was cherry red, all completely in flames, and the whole staircase going upstairs was in flames. And the woman, when she called the police, she said, we're in a 2nd floor bedroom, and my husband is barricading the door, and so these intruders won't get in. In the meantime, the blizzard of the fire took the power out of the house, completely gone. And he called the fire department. The fire department, Roy Wines was the first at the scene. It was a very narrow driveway. And he pulled in, and the people in said they're in the 2nd floor bedroom. And the ladder was on the passenger side of the truck. He grabbed the ladder, threw it over top of the truck, and he couldn't walk around it. And extended the ladder up to this window. And the window was covered with a sheet of ice and snow and everything from the blizzard. Roy was able to force it open. And at that time, the smoke was coming underneath the door that they had barricaded into that room, into the dark room where they couldn't see or anything. So Roy said, you have to come out the window. And the woman says, I'm pregnant. I can never fit out that window, and I'm too afraid. I'm scared. She said, I'm afraid of falling. Roy says, I'm not going to fall, and I'm not going to let you fall. But you have to come out. So she came out. Going into a 2nd floor window is no problem. But coming out, half your body has to hang out before your feet touch the ladder. So she finally came out with her husband kind of shoving her, actually. And Roy planted her feet on the ladder, brought her down the ladder, and her husband followed. And so Roy had said to her, now, what am I going to do with you? She said, what do you mean? He said, you don't have any shoes on or anything. She was barefooted going down that ladder, blizzard conditions, pregnant, and as cold as it was, that was a horrible feeling for a woman to have to go through. But he put her in a police car, and she went down to the hospital for mini treatment, whatever. And, 21 years after the fact, this woman, the rescued woman, Pat Ruggieri, wrote a letter in Roy's behalf. And the company officers at that time, Mike Crow, and Charlie Grodsky went before council and asked that they recognize the Medal of Valor for Roy, which was long overdue and well-deserved. There was no convincing necessary. They approved it immediately. So within a couple of months, we had an award ceremony. Surprise to Roy. Roy didn't know a thing about it. And they, at the ceremony, his whole family was present. All the people in the village and town that he served with as mayor, as a planning board, they were all present. Almost every chief that wanted to go was there. Every chief wanted to go there. And it was just a great, great night. And Pat Ruggieri was there. So It was just a real nice evening. That next day, Roy's sister Arlene called, spoke to Irene, and said that it was the highlight of Roy's life. And having Pat being present that night was so much more meaningful. And now, that girl, the 21-year-old daughter, we tried to get to come to that event. She was in Boston College, had to take exams the next day and couldn't make it. But she was born a redhead. And she's still a redhead, I guess, right? But that was, I guess, the extent of what I had to say about it.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes of camera take, and we're going to give one of them to Doc Fanning.
Yes, coming up on November 16th, we're having a blood drive, and if anyone could give us a pint of blood, we'd appreciate it. It's at the Sacred Hearts School on Hill Street, and it's from 2:30 to 7:45.
We'll be there.
Thank you for your help.
We'll be there. Just a quick question. It must be quite a strong bond between you all. Am I right about that? I mean, doing the things that you do and sort of facing dangerous situations, how does that make you feel?
The camaraderie is the best in the world. It really is. If you ever want to support group, the fire department is there.
Yeah. I've gotten to that feeling a lot, getting to know you all, and yes.
Quickly, if you see a blue light or something going down the road, we're responding to an alarm, and we're rushing to save a life. That's our primary purpose in the fire service: save a life and then put the fire out. So if you do see a blue light, it's one of the firemen heading down to get to the truck and get to the fire. So if you could just give him a little bit of room, he'd appreciate it, and it might save a life also.
I'd like to say one thing. Two fellows weren't mentioned tonight, Dan and Craig. I'd just like to have them recognized. They were very helpful with me tonight.
Thank you very much. Once again, Roy, thanks for your help. Thank you all very much for participating. I wish we could go on because I know we have more stories, but I want to thank you and tell you what a pleasure it's been, I think, on our behalf to hear you. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're hoping you don't go away. We're going to turn the music back on. We have kielbasa, we have chicken wings, we have free soda, and thanks for coming.